Guyana's real estate boom. What the data can't yet confirm. Guyana's real estate story is usually told as a straight line: oil money in, property values up. Production that began in December 2019 has grown past 645,000 barrels a day. GDP expanded roughly 19.3% in 2025, and the IMF projects another 16.2% for 2026. Add diaspora capital and a wave of commercial development, and Georgetown looks like one of the hottest small real estate markets in the hemisphere. Residential values are reported to have climbed as much as 180% between 2019 and 2024, with some East Bank Demerara land parcels roughly doubling. But a straight line up is exactly what should make a real estate professional pause. The harder question isn't whether Guyana's market is booming. It's what that boom is pricing in, and whether buyers can tell a property's real value from a number that reflects a story about the future. That distinction matters more here than in almost any market I advise on, because Guyana still lacks the basics most buyers take for granted: a public price index, a searchable listing history, or a deep pool of comparable, arm's-length sales. The boom? In numbers. The run-up itself isn't in dispute. Guyana's real estate sector was valued at roughly US $25.5 billion in 2024. Residential property, the majority of that, with forecasts pointing to continued mid-single-digit growth through the decade. Office rents in prime Georgetown have reportedly risen around 200% since 2019 as oil sector tenants compete for scarce commercial-grade space. Residential rents, once quoted at US $144 to $168 a month, are effectively unavailable today, and East Bank Demerara land that traded around US $16,800 to $19,200 now sells above US $36,000. Set against that, average monthly salaries are still commonly cited in the low hundreds of US dollars, and a meaningful share of the population lives on a few dollars a day. When neighborhood prices in parts of Georgetown rival New York City, that gap is the central tension of the market. A 2020 IMF working paper, using 2016 to 2018 data, found a price-to-income ratio near 35 in Georgetown, the highest in the region, with mortgage debt near 350% of household income before the biggest years of the run-up. Even so, the IMF's conclusion was cautious rather than alarmed. Prices tracked fundamentals rather than a bubble. Though the authors admitted the finding rested on thin data, Guyana has no formal price index, so they used a housing sub-index buried inside the consumer price index as a stand-in. That's the crux of the boom or bust question. Nobody, including the institutions best equipped to answer it, has the data to answer it with confidence. Why comparable sales don't really exist here? In an established market, a valuation starts with comparables. Recent, arm's-length sales of similar nearby properties, adjusted for condition and timing. That depends on transaction data being recorded and accessible, and Guyana doesn't yet have that plumbing. There's no MLS-equivalent price history. Land sits under two parallel title regimes: the older transport system, rooted in Roman Dutch law with a 3-month public notice period, and the newer, faster certificate of title Torrens system, which hasn't fully displaced it, and a meaningful share of land is still untitled, requiring buyers to establish ownership through years of documented possession rather than a clean deed. Add a housing authority controlling large tracts of undeveloped land amid real bureaucratic friction, and comparable sales are often not comparable at all. Different title types, different documentation risk, prices that vary by how badly a seller needs to close. Georgetown agents will tell you plainly that asking prices are almost always negotiable. Another way of saying the listed number isn't really a price signal. Intrinsic value versus a story about the future. This is where the sales comparison problem forces buyers back onto more fundamental methods, and where the market's speculative character becomes visible. There are broadly two ways to value a Guyanese property today. One is intrinsic, what it would cost to replace the structure, and what income it can reliably generate now, discounted for real risk. Realistic rental yields run 5 to 10%, with income-based appreciation more like 10 to 20% in strong years, healthy but explainable. The other is speculative, pricing a parcel on what it might be worth once a nearby project finishes, once a road is paved, once a hoped-for wave of oil sector workers or returning diaspora arrives to occupy it. Guyana's boom has visibly drifted toward the speculative approach in pockets of the market. Developers have built commercial space at what locals call Manhattan prices, only to see investors doing real due diligence walk away because surrounding infrastructure and tenant demand don't support that pricing, leaving completed buildings sitting empty. That's the signature of value built on anticipated future use. It works until the tenant doesn't show up on schedule and the asset is worth whatever the next optimistic bidder will pay. None of this means the growth story is fake. Oil production is genuinely expanding toward a projected 1.2 million barrels a day by 2027. And that translates into real housing demand. The point is narrower. With no price index and thin comparable data, this will be worth more once X happens easily gets substituted for this is worth Y today. And few buyers have the tools to notice. How diaspora buyers can anchor to real value. For diaspora buyers, the practical challenge is that you're usually not in Georgetown to feel out whether an asking price is fundamentals or hope. A few disciplines help. Start with an independent valuation, not the seller's or agent's number. With no public price index to lean on, a proper appraisal has to rebuild value from the ground up, replacement cost, plus an evidence-based rental income projection, not an aspirational one. Verify title before any money moves through a Guyanese attorney searching the deeds or land registry, confirming the title regime, whether the transport document is unencumbered, whether heirs have consented on family land, and whether taxes are current. Untitled land requiring 12 years of possession history is a materially different risk than a clean certificate of title, even at the same street price. Treat any premium tied to future infrastructure or appreciation as a separate line item, not something absorbed into the asking price. Ask what the property is worth today on current rents, and what portion of the ask is a bet on the future. If a seller can't separate those numbers, that's information in itself. Budget realistically. Transaction costs run 5 to 6.5% of purchase price in stamp duty, legal fees, and registration. Rental income is taxed at a flat 33.33%, with a 25% capital gains rate. Anchor to conservative yield assumptions, 5 to 10% rental, not the most optimistic number quoted at a diaspora investment event. Finally, work with advisors on both sides of the transaction. People who understand Guyanese title law and local conditions, and also how a diaspora buyer needs a deal structured, financed, and documented. That gap, local information the buyer can't verify from abroad, and financing considerations the local market doesn't account for, is exactly what causes diaspora buyers to overpay. Real due diligence, not just enthusiasm about the growth story, turns buying into the boom into a defensible decision. The honest answer: is Guyana's real estate market a boom or a bust waiting to happen? The honest answer is that it's a market still building the infrastructure, data, title systems, valuation standards to answer that question with real confidence. That's not a reason to stay out. The underlying growth is real and unusual by regional standards. It's a reason to insist on independent valuation, clean title, and income-based underwriting before treating any asking price as a starting point rather than a fact. In a market without reliable comparables, the discipline to separate what something is worth from what it might someday be worth is the whole ballgame. Clarity creates opportunity. Visit us at themcmillangroupinc.com or primepathmfs.com.